Will James left us with fascinating stories, stories that are filled with an astonishing realism, something you seldom find anywhere else. Uh, you read Will James and you cannot not believe that this man went through this experience himself, that he knew this world uh, in every aspect. He writes too many details not to be the man of the situation. And in this sense, I believe that Will James is no different than most of the writers in the world. He starts from events that he knew well, that he lived himself, and he gradually drifts away, let his imagination fly away into a fictitious world. This is why Will James makes us dream, and there is nothing wrong with readers dreaming away because of their good writer. But at the same time, I believe that there is an amount of truth in all of this, and this is what I set out to do. That's why I'm here, to find what I call the Will James truth. Beaupré. Why did Will James call his character Jean Beaupré? Jean Beaupré in French, the pronunciation is not Jean Beaupré, but Jean Beaupré. And Jean Beaupré, if you keep repeating this, it sounds very much like Jean Beaupré. And Jean Beaupré means Giant Beaupré. And Giant Beaupré was sort of a national hero for Quebec people, especially. Everybody in Quebec thought that he was actually born in Quebec. So I thought, well, okay, Will James gave us a wink. He just called the guy Jean Beaupré, like Jean Beaupré, like Giant Beaupré. But then I realized that when I searched, that Giant Beaupré was not actually Quebecois. He was born in southern Saskatchewan, one of the earliest francophone towns in Saskatchewan, very near the US border, which is very important hint because so many of the Will James stories take place near either the state lines or the Canada-US border, as you all know, or as you might know. And of course, there are the Badlands not far from here. Of course, many Badlands in the US, but there are Badlands near Willow Bunch, and this is a very important hint. So I decided to shift my research here, especially when a writer who was originally named Ernest Dufault decides to change his name for Will James and Willow Bunch. That sounds very much like Will James' type of humor. So I think that this is a good lead to start my research. Okay, if Beaupré brought me to Willow Bunch, he's not the only element that brought me here. There are several factors. First of all, there is the social context of the time. Will James' mother was renowned for being extremely Catholic, and I thought, well, he's 15 years old, not speaking a word of English. Would she allow him to leave if she thought that he would be in a different religious context? I thought that she would send him only if she was sure that he was going to be in a French-Canadian house. The best contact that I can think of would have been Pascal Bonneau Jr. Why? Because Pascal Bonneau Jr. would spend most of his winters in Montreal every year. He was one of the biggest ranchers in the Willow Bunch area, in the Big Muddy, where you can find the Badlands, and of course where you could find a lot of the outlaws crossing the border constantly with stolen either horses or cattle. He was known for always carrying his guns and his rifle, which is very unusual for Canadian ranchers of the time. He had not much choice. At the same time, he was famous for giving a lot to the church and all this. He corresponds perfectly to the character described by Will James in a few of his books. Then from Pascal Bonneau Jr., he might have moved to Jean-Louis Légary's place. Why? Well, because Jean-Louis Légary was the co-founder of Willow Bunch. Like Beaupré, he was a real trapper for many years. Then he was a fur trader with the métis of the area. He had ranches, he raised cattle, and at one point he had more than 2,000 horses on his ranch. So he again corresponds to several of the characters described by Will James. Always the older guy with a white beard and white hair, loving horses and things like this. The only thing he would change was the name, but strangely enough, he would call his character Beaupré. Beaupré in English means beautiful meadow, but he would call him also Joe Deschamps, but Deschamps means field. Meadow and field is quite similar, and two of these characters in other books are called Mansfields. Mansfield corresponds to Deschamps and Beaupré. So I think it's quite fascinating when we put all these things together. One of the other hints is Treflé Bonneau. Treflé Bonneau was Pascal Bonneau Jr.'s brother. He had lost one arm in an accident, but he was a big card player, and he was famous for being able to shuffle a deck of cards with only one arm, which corresponds exactly to one character that Will James described very briefly in one of his books. I don't think there were that many guys with only one arm who could shuffle a deck of cards as well as anybody else all over North America. I think this is quite unique, and I think it brings us somewhere. The last hint that I have is the way that Will James called his mother in his biography, The Lone Cowboy. He called his mother Bunny. Bunny, and when we know how important the Bonneau family was in the Willow Bunch area, that sounds like a Will James hint. We could be wrong, and from now on, what we have to do, these are only theories. From now on, we have to prove that these things are real facts. So I count on you to help me to uncover this Will James enigma.